Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Point of View, our online conversational series in design by Cinder Bay School of Design in collaboration with Association of Designers of India. Point of View is a celebration of Cinder Bay's 15 years as a design school, an institution that teaches fashion, interiors, communication, animation, and filmmaking. And under the leadership of their director, Professor Basan Nair. My name is Srishti Bajaj, and I am your curator and moderator. I'm a product designer by training, but also an educator and mentor. And I've had a lot of fun over the last 3 weeks where we've had 9 episodes with 9 creative stars. And last week's segment was dedicated to textiles. We had the brilliant Gaurav Gupta from Akaro looking at textiles and clothing. We had Akila from Twa Indian spinning yarns with decor applications of textiles and prints. We had Chandrasekhar Bera with his magnificent installations. If you've missed any of those sessions, please check it out on Cinderbay's YouTube channel. And now we are back with week 4. This is day 10. And we've got another 3 fantastic speakers lined up for you this week. This week we are focusing on architecture. And first up is architect Rahul Kadri from IMK Architects, who will bring on in just a minute. Tomorrow is the fabulous Mariana Caballera from Zaha Hadid Architects. And on Saturday, we'll have the parametric wizard architect Takbir Fatima. So please tune in and make sure you are able to catch them live. So today, like I mentioned, is architect Rahul Kadri. And let me very quickly introduce him as well. He's a principal architect and partner for IMK Kadri Architects. He completed his diploma in architecture from Academy of Architecture, Mumbai, and went on to pursue a master's degree in urban planning from University of Michigan in 1988. IMK Architects, for people who may not know, is an architectural, urban planning and interior design firm based out of Bombay and Bangalore. They have work spanning over the last 50 years. They've stood by their aim for extraordinary work. Rahul, of course, assumed directorship in 95, and since then he's designed and executed several architecture and town planning projects under his leadership. He has designed townships for Tatas, the Jindals, the Reliance, hotels and resorts for Taj and Club Mahindra, college campuses for Symbiosis, the Supreme Court of India, and many more. Over the years, he has honed his skills and passion to create places where people and nature thrive. And apart from this engagement with architecture, he's also actively involved in effective development of open spaces in Mumbai, and we'll get to see a glimpse of some of those projects through the conversation today. He's also, many may not know of this, but he also has a very tender, kind heart, and he is the trustee of Save the Children India, an organization committed to the cause of education of the lesser privileged children of India. So without further ado, may I please welcome Rahul to join us for this session. Rahul, please, could we have you on camera?
Yeah.
Hi, Rahul, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Shrishti, for having me here. I just saw the array of speakers once again. It's brilliant. Thank you so much for having me.
I think the pleasure is all ours. And I think for students watching in the audiences, it's such a great opportunity to actually be able to see your work and have you talk about your work. I mean, you know, one would probably go online and look at where you've spoken or, you know, articles that have featured you. But I think today we really get to, in some sense, deconstruct what your work has been about and some of your inspirations, in fact, which I think is very exciting. I don't think in our previous conversation that's come up. So I'm very excited for have you share that with students. So without further ado, let's begin. I know for a fact that when I chatted with you last time, you had a great affinity for nature, and the fact that you grew up and you went to school in Nainital greatly influenced this confluence. And I also understand that with your work and with IMK's work, there's a great intent to have biophilic architecture as an important mainstay of all the projects that you do. So I'm very, very curious how that and urban planning have come together in your work, because when we look at urban planning, especially in India, it's a mammoth task. So I think just to sort of realize that the number of stakeholders that are usually involved in a project at that scale, the political rigmarole that one requires to navigate for projects like that is quite intense. So please let's begin where at the beginning, I guess. And
Oh, yeah, I'll share my screen.
please.
Uh,
We can see it.
yeah, so I think that you gave a lovely format. We're looking at the past, present, and the future. And as you know said that I spent a lot of my time where I was growing up in Nainital, and I was constantly looking out of the window, and whenever I had a chance, walking in the forest. So my aim was always to, just pass and make it to the next class, and that was it. I had no other uh, ambition but to do that at that point in time, and I just loved walking in the forest. So I did a lot of that at Sherwood, and that's kind of stayed with me. But when I was studying architecture, I think in the third or fourth year of my 5 years, my dad got this book and gave this book to me, Pattern Language by Christopher Alexander. Christopher Alexander was a physicist from Germany who later became an architect. So he approached architecture very mathematically, but he was really a genius. And he articulated very kind of poignantly how the geometry of space and the combination of the geometries allow us to certain activities thrive because of the geometry. And we were struggling students searching for meaning, searching for how things are done. And architecture is taught by the studio method, where you're given a problem and you solve it, but you're not really told, or no one's really thought through what makes a difference, what geometry really makes a difference. So Christopher Alexander really did that in a very significant way. And so his thoughts had a deep impact on me, and some of his uh, ideas were just very, very deep. You take this one, for example, City and Country Fingers, where he says that a town needs to be planned so that it's no more than 1.5 kilometers wide, and you've got farmland, interspersed with cities. This makes so much sense because our transportation networks are linear. Whether you have a road or you have a bus line, you have a train, all of that is linear. So you can literally have things. If I were to draw on this screen, you can have a linear train line and then another train line cross, and with stations, and it just works so well. And then within 5 minutes, everybody gets to be in with nature. So it's just such a simple, powerful diagram, which we've tried to do over and over again. I'm going to have to figure out a way to erase all this stuff. Okay. Yeah. So this I found one of the most powerful. So like this, he came up with such beautiful diagrams, which would kind of assist design. So you knew what you were trying to achieve.
Right.
So there's principles of planning.
Can I just interrupt you very quickly? I know this I'm interrupting very early in the presentation, but
yeah,
this is an ideal diagram. And if we look at our cities currently, even if you were to compare, let's say, a city like Bombay or Delhi and a Bangalore, which are in, let's say, three corners of the country, by intuitive planning or the chaos of planning, do we have any city in India that follows this principle?
No.
Not even one.
No, I can't think of anything. See, Bombay, South Bombay, to some extent, as you go further south, because of the peninsula and it's not wide enough, so kind of Kolaba, Cuff Parade, etc. Because we've got the sea on either. You don't have farmland, but you've got sea on either side. You can get to the sea in a 5-minute walk. So British Bombay, you could say, had this, but it was more because of the geography than anything else. It was not an intentional thing. So modern planning, what we try to do is maybe not follow this diagram, but to follow the one below, wherein you've got an urban core where you can have an FSI, you can have the very tall buildings at the center, and as you go out, you have the natural reserves. You, instead of having just very dense and then farmland, you can have a transition, the way you're seeing at the strip on your screens below. So this happens, but it doesn't happen. This happens in more circular fashion. So it doesn't lead to the kind of city country fingers that Christopher Alexander talks about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Christopher Alexander was a very early influence on my life and his pattern language. And later, when I started practicing, Charles Moore, I read a lot of his work. He was also an educator. So Christopher Alexander taught at Berkeley, and I went, and after I finished my urban planning, I went and knocked on his door and I said, I've loved your work. I want to work for you. And he said, you're a lucky man. I need someone today, and come in and work. So I worked with him for a year in Berkeley, and learned a lot directly from the master. And then when I came back, Charles Moore influenced me a lot, and his two thoughts of his really struck: that we are social animals, we want to belong, and we all want to live in the forest. These are two such powerful thoughts. And for architects, we don't, as architects, we don't normally think of this, but he had articulated it so strongly. Ever since then, all our buildings were really about friendships, about form, about neighborliness, about friendships, about how people will make friends on campuses. So this is just some of his work. Very unique, very memorable work. He also believed that you want places to be unique and memorable, so that it's what you do in those spaces is linked. What you experience there and what you with your friends is linked to the space again. And he did very postmodern work, which was fascinating. So in the 90s, postmodernism, but this is really neoclassicism, and postmodernism somehow didn't go well with me. It was more a classicist. So neoclassicism is something that he was doing, that Leon Krier was doing. Leon Krier is another influence who I haven't mentioned here. Again, a neoclassicist, a new classicism. Those are the kind of projects that I was drawn to, because I felt there were certain archetypes, there were certain basic forms that had been part of our history that we responded to, and you couldn't take away from that. There was meaning in many of those, and they can be interpreted in a fresh way.
Lovely.
Yeah. So then Shrishti, you said, what are some of the learnings we've had? And this is actually a very successful township we did for JSW Steel. It's a 50 acres. And they had a plan before this, which was actually a grid.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a grid. And we were supposed to have 500 homes in this grid. And what we found in that grid was that there wasn't a gradation of scale, of um, friendships. So what we said is that we feel that about 20 to 30 homes should share a space. So that's what we did. We created clusters, and then we created a pedestrian path which kind of linked all of these, you know. Um, so there was a very tight space for about 20 to 30 where they really got to know their neighbor, the pedestrian space. And then all of them kind of met on this larger ground. And then we later put a football field in here. And it worked very well on the pedestrian scale. Sorry, I need to rub this out. But it kind of failed on the township scale. So this was one of the neighborhoods, right? So the top left corner. Right. And at this scale, it worked very well. But the streetscape, we found that, you know, it was dead. So there was no, the street was absolutely red because all the action was happening here or here. And the character on the street was very, very poor. And we also found that people were not using these spaces as much as we thought they would because of the density. There weren't enough people to make this come alive. So that's a very common mistake architects made, and I learned the hard way that, you know, there is an ideal density for all of this. You know, you can't, you know, we in our cities, we're so starved for space that we said, okay, if we create space and we create walkways, people will come. But you need people for people to come. There needs to be enough people. So that was a mistake that we made. We separated the energy of regular movement of people. So, you know, we had the vehicular zone and the pedestrian zone. We separated them completely. And we later realized that that's a mistake. So doing this in urban planning, though it's theoretically sounds very good, where you've got the vehicular zone and the pedestrian zone separate from each other, sounds very good, but the energy is distributed. So what we've started
segregated,
so what really works is the traditional one, but having them coexist well, rather than segregating. We thought, you know, safety wise, children on cycle, no cars, etc. It didn't work. It was too dry.
So can I ask you a question here? I mean, you know, we're living in today's day and age. I think there's a lot of conversation about changing cities into more pedestrian friendly zones. So I can definitely speak from Delhi's point of view, especially places like Connaught Place, like Old Delhi, like certain other zones where they're actually cordoning off vehicular traffic to make more room for pedestrians. And I wonder whether that, I mean, again, intuitively as an ideal town planner, you would say, well, that's a great thing. But does that actually work? Is there a common mean that allows both to coexist? Have you discovered that in your work?
Well, Shrishti, so as I said, it's a question of density. Cities, especially a place like Connaught Place or in Bombay, if it's DN Road, because of the density and the numbers, it would work because there would be enough people coming there, and it would thrive. So it depends on the density of the place. In Vidyanagar, where we did this, the density was so low that the idea failed. So the same idea will work extremely well in a city like Bombay or Delhi, where it's the urban center, where there's enough people around to come there, and you're not doing too much of it, right? You're doing it only for a 2-kilometer zone or something like that. Like then it'll work. If you do more than that, then it won't work. So there's a balance you need to strike in these places. So so that was.
Before we move ahead, I have a poll question for our audiences actually here, because we are talking
Yeah.
about pedestrian cities. Can we have the first poll question? And I also would like to ask your response to this question after we get it from the audiences. So here's a guess, guys. Considering that we're talking about pedestrian traffic and movement, how many people do you think really walk to work in most cities in India today? 10%, 20%, 50%, or more than 50%. As designers, as not just as urban planners, but as people who design our own lives, I think this becomes a pertinent question, because with, of course, pollution and ecosystems and all the viability, rising petrol and fuel costs, I think from the context of urban planning and the lifestyles you live, this becomes really, really critical. I know that we're going to talk about urban planning a little later, Rahul, but what I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you here was that, um, in your mind, what is really the right way to approach this question? Do we turn everybody into a public transportation individual, that you stop using cars? Or is that never going to happen?
Um, Ideally, you want as many people as possible to walk.
Mm,
That's the if that is our single focus, and if we
mhm,
do nothing else, if we don't spend a pie more on anything, but we spend on improving our footpaths in
mhm,
all the cities we have, that will be the most significant thing we actually do. Because I know in most towns, more than 50% of the people walk to work, walk to school, walk to everything.
mhm,
They either walk, so 50%, that's a significant number. Um, the other issue with it is our planning model, where we have, zones, where we have residential zone, commercial zone, etc. That leads to the transportation problem. We need mixed use. So every kilometer by kilometer, if you take a neighborhood, we need to have everything in that. We need to have work, leisure, education, healthcare, everything. So everybody can walk to
mm,
places.
mm,
So it's really, we were trying to solve the problem of pollution in the 60s and the 70s when
mhm,
we did zoning.
mhm.
So it started off by saying industry should move out of a city. That's where it started, because cities really
For
came
living.
about because of industrialization,
Mhm,
and and the density happened because there was a factory there.
mhm.
So all cities besides Delhi, possibly, which has been an administrative city, Bombay at the least, was because of the mills and and the shipping, the trade and the mills. That's what
Yes,
created it.
that's true.
Um, so and planning was about controlling pollution, saying, okay, we will have industry, we only be located in this area, and then everybody else is to commute. Well,
Mm,
industry is much cleaner now, and service industry is more the norm, which doesn't pollute. So this notion of zoning is really outdated, and we need to get rid of it completely. Except, um, those are the kind of reforms we really need, where our laws need to be amended. There's the Town Planning Act of 1960,
mhm.
which is followed by all bureaucrats. Even politicians can't do anything about it. They have to follow the law. They have to follow the process of law, and that says there shall be zoning. So till we don't change those laws, urban planners like me or anybody can say anything, but it's really the lawyers who need to change these laws. Till that doesn't happen, nothing is going to happen. So yeah,
Same.
we need to. If there's one thing we do, it's get people to walk more. If we can do that, it'll solve so many problems. So many problems.
We do
Uh,
really need to look in the past policies to be able to make a different future. Can we have the answer, Swapna, from the poll, please? Wow, people really think that fewer people than what your estimate was. 20% seems to be the highest answer, that only 20% of people walk to
yeah.
work. Which I have a feeling that a lot of these, because we said cities, perhaps is more accurate, but you suppose that in smaller towns and outside cities, it's a bigger number.
In Bombay, it's 50%.
Wow.
Bombay.
50% walk to work.
50% walk to work, Bombay. That's a government census figure, not mine.
Wow.
50% walk to work in Bombay. Yeah. And this is not saying that they walk from their home to the bus stop and therefore they're walking. No. The beginning to end is a walk only.
Fabulous.
See, the thing about Bombay is that 55% people live in slums, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who live in slums, they usually live in a slum close to where they work.
That's true.
Right? So they walk to work. So, and the older parts of Bombay where people live and work in the same place, they have their shop or their workshop or whatever in the same neighborhood. So, and this is really, I don't know about Delhi, but this is across Maharashtra at the least. This is how it is. 50% or more walk to work. And I think most small towns may not be in Delhi. I'm not sure about Delhi. I don't have the figures, but I think most other small towns, people walk to work.
I think Delhi, because of the large distances, spread out city planning, I don't think it happens as much anymore.
Yeah, but people may be, living close to their work.
Well, that's
to
the
a great
hope.
extent.
I think that's an ambition for a lot of young people. I know that for sure. So let's move ahead.
Okay. So really, so it's been an endeavor of mine to, find out what is an effective design process to get to designs that are meaningful and to get to designs that we're able to do, effectively and quickly. And this was one book, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which really influenced probably in the 90s or 2000, how our office worked. And it was more mission based. We would set out, to define what we were trying to achieve, and, say, this is our mission. So we were in mission mode. And one of the first, this date is wrong, 2003 is when we were doing the Symbiosis International University. And we set out a mission of what we want to achieve for the campus, and then went about doing it. This process, I would say, we still use as a mission. It's like defining what you want to achieve, except then we were doing it. This is some of the campus that was built since then. And then we did Club Mahindra at similar time, 2003 to 2004. And basically the difference between what we're doing then and what we're doing now it's also, you can say, a mission mode, but it's not a big mission. Now we, we have some big philosophical touch points where we want to make buildings that are timeless, that are socially responsible, that are biophilic, that are robust. These are the major touch points, but it's become a very client-based process where earlier it was, us brainstorming in our office and coming up with a solution for our client.
Right.
Now it's much more intense workshops with our clients. We very intensely want to understand what's important to them and not just second guess. So earlier it was, me as the architect, I know everything and I don't really need to talk to you in a very deep way. Now we talk to our clients every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And we start with a very intense workshop. So we're constantly adjusting what we do in 2-week cycles. So we start with a very intensive workshop, which creates a focus. We want to know what's really valuable for them. We want to be very clear about it. And we want our entire team to be very clear about it. So it's a very intensive workshop to start with, where we prioritize the design requirement. That's a very important thing, prioritize, because earlier we were looking at overall effects. Now we look at features. What are the 100 feet to get these effects that we want? What are the 100 features this building or this campus is going to have? And what is more important and what is less? Because you never have enough money and never have enough time. So we use the 80-20 principle that 20% of the features are going to give you 80% of the value. So let's find out what those 20% are and prioritize them, so that we spend most of our time really refining that, and the client spends their money on those rather than trying to do too much. There's always a problem of trying to do too much. Then the other thing we do now is that a team will not do multiple projects. A team will do one project at a time only. And that's made a tremendous difference in terms of completing projects much faster, because multitasking is one of the worst things you can do for efficiency. And then getting constant client feedback every 2 weeks. So this has led to things going much, much faster, and we don't go off track. Otherwise, what would happen is that we would work on our own for a month and then go meet the client, and then the client would come up with something they hadn't told us before, which would change everything. So then you spend another month redoing everything. So we do short cycles now, constantly checking whether what we're doing is correct or no. So yeah, client workshops, prioritization, this 80-20 principle. And I've had, when we do these workshops, so this is a workshop we're doing for a residential development in Bangalore. And in the south, Vastu is uppermost. When you're talking to the marketing team, you're designing apartments, they say, Vastu is the most important thing. But when we do the workshop, when we ask them, what is going to really make a difference in your customers' lives? What's going to bring them happiness that they've never known? What's going to bring health for their families? How is the family going to become more of a family? The social aspect of being a family. What's really going to make a difference to your customers and the users? Then they come up with things like cross ventilation and daylight and community spaces. And then when we prioritize and we rank these with them, they realize that Vastu is not important. There's these other things that are much more important. So it kind of really it's a learning process for them. So we use this as a learning process for them. So we really get a very deep buy-in because they have participated in the strategy. So this is the project we're working on now, where we've just completed phase 1. Because of where the land was and the access road, we could go only ground plus 4, and we kind of turned that on its head and said that you're going to live with the birds, etc., on the trees. You're going to be very grounded in doing this. So these are actual pictures of the site. We're just handing over phase 1 in a few weeks. So similarly, a university library for Sonar College in the south, wherein we eventually came up with they wanted something really iconic to they've been around for 50 years. They wanted to kind of announce that there's something based on the future. So we came up with a building which kind of represented it with a little more futuristic in the way it looked. So what are some of the things the office is looking forward to doing now?
Rahul, can I interrupt you for a quick second there?
Yes. Yes.
What I was just very quickly thinking was that This is also a residential complex that you've just completed, the Sonar office, the Sonar residential complex.
Yeah.
And I was curious that when you talked about the Jindal residential complex, and this is something that you've done recently, what have been the shifts that you've seen when we talk about the green spaces versus how people are interacting within those spaces? Has that remained the same, or do you feel that the learnings from there and how you've transformed the spaces here is different?
Shrishti, these are two very different projects. The Jindal one was a 50 acres, and actually now we are doing a 125-acre project for the Jindals, which I wish I had shown. It's very different. It is a modified grid, and we have balanced the way pedestrian and vehicles and cycling and all that is used. But this is a much smaller, much more compact 10-acre project where actually there's a basement underneath where all the car parking is going below. So you won't see any cars in this development at all. We just have a peripheral road because of the density. This FSI is 2, very dense. So it's a very different project compared to the townships. In the townships, the number of people, etc., are much, much lower. Here we are struggling for open space. You really can't compare learnings from there to here.
Okay. And through the Scrum process, as you've seen, the people who have resided, I mean, you're handing over, so nobody's actually moved in yet. But how does one anticipate, or like, I'm comparing it with the design thinking process where you get to prototype and you get you're able to very quickly do a test of with the users, and you're able to then come up with results. In architecture, that's not always possible. So how do you simulate what the residents would actually experience? And I just don't mean a 3D walkthrough. I mean from the real person who might in the future be living here. Is there a way to bridge that gap?
No, I wish there was. Because it would make such a difference if that was possible to do. But what we have been doing to a small extent is throughout the process of building phase 1. So we built about 400 houses, 400 apartments in phase 1. And we were constantly in touch with the marketing team, constantly asking them, what are customers saying? What are they responding to? What do they like? What do they not like? What's selling? What's not? And we kept tweaking the plans to, be more responsive to what people were asking. And sometimes I would actually go in and coach the marketing team. I said, see, people haven't seen something like this. This is what you need to point out. This is what you need to highlight. And this is how you need to kind of draw them in to what we are trying to do here, because they will not have experienced this before. So they will not have a reference for it.
That's true.
So we are hoping phase 2 will be much easier because now people will have experienced this. Because people in Bangalore have either experienced a standalone bungalow or a high rise. Community living on a low scale, there are very, very few projects like this. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If we could do that, if people could actually experience, living 1 week in different kinds of spaces and then deciding which one to buy, it would be ideal. If we can have what are they called, Airbnb
it.
Give people experiences. So before someone buys, we can say, okay, you can stay 1 week here, 1 week here, 1 week here, 1 week here, and then you decide which one you like. I think that's a good way actually for people to buy.
Try it and then buy it.
We'd be horrified over here because in spite of everything and being able to get around the marketing team, etc., finally, when it came down to it, marketing team is Saab, wo South entrance hai na, they're not buying. So I would say, okay, then don't sell it to someone from Tamil Nadu, sell it to someone from Andhra, because Andhra people, their Vastu is different. So find someone from another region in the country whose beliefs are different. Um, and yeah, so it and the problem with apartments and selling them is that it's not one generation deciding. It's such a big investment. It's that if a young couple is buying, then the parents come in, the in-laws come in, uncles, aunts, everything. And if one person says something about anything to do with faith, then you're dead. There's nothing you can do about it. Anyway, let's move on. Yeah. So that's it. So Vastu and me are not really very good friends. Uh, though sometimes it makes sense. Vastu makes sense at times. But when there's a Vastu Pandit from Rajasthan who's spouting things in Bombay, he knows about Rajasthan and the climate there and some of the principles that were evolved there, but that doesn't work in Bombay. And because for them it's a dogma, they don't understand that the Vastu principles in Bombay are not the same as Rajasthan. Yeah. What works there doesn't work here. But it's a dogma. It's not understood as a set of principles. And that's the problem. Yeah. So should we move on?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. So what are we looking at the future? We're looking, to make teams much more autonomous. We feel as architecture firms, we don't use the intelligence of the entire team in a meaningful way. The kind of senior people kind of hog stuff. So we've adopted Scrum, wherein the senior person or the team lead only defines what is to be done, and the team members come up with how. The team head is really not permitted to say how to achieve something. So we get very new, fresh ideas of how to achieve what the team head says we're trying to achieve. So that's something that the organizational structure is changing because of that, and we're trying to sprout very autonomous teams. So even with me, I try to influence only the very key things, and then I have to kind of not sketch or not speak for a while and let a struggle happen. So that and very often I'm so surprised at what fresh creative minds think, that I say, okay, thank God I kept my mouth shut. It took a little longer, but we ended up with something so much better. So that's an effort we're really trying to make in the office to foster this creativity within the office. Okay. But we're also, I think we've reached a stage in our office, and I've reached an age where I can, begin to influence policy. And we're looking at, urban areas, and we've spoken about the Town Planning Act and how the Town Planning Act work and how our municipal corporations work. So I'm trying to talk to the government now about participatory planning, not only in terms of physical planning, but budgetary allocations, because where you allocate money is where is what can. And so people living in an area, in a neighborhood, really know and experience and know what needs to happen in the neighborhood to improve their lives. So if you ask them, what are the three things that could really change things for your neighborhood, they would know. But some bureaucrat sitting in an office 5 miles away, if you ask him, what do you think is really important in that particular neighborhood, no matter how intelligent they are, they will not know. So it's about process. It's not about honesty or corruption or intelligence. It's just about system and process. So we're trying to convince the government that you have to use the intelligence on the ground to improve. You cannot centralize this function. It will never work. It cannot work.
This is a significant policy framework, and what you just mentioned is probably, if adopted at a large scale, could change absolutely the way the government thinks about planning. And
Yeah.
it's, I mean, it's a very potent process, if only there was intent. So my question to the audience is, and it might be guesswork for a lot of you, but can we have the next poll question, please? So the question is, uh, yeah, thank you. Think about which cities that you know of, or listed here, are using participatory budget making process in India. Is it Pune, Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, or Lucknow? I don't know, the audience may know, may not know. I'm very curious to find out. We'll give you guys 1 minute to very quickly answer this. So I'm coming back to you, Rahul, here.
Yeah.
Is this something that you had to kind of, how did you convince? That's my first question, actually. How did you convince the local administrative bodies to actually adopt a process like this?
Well, I haven't, not as yet.
Ah,
When I was thinking about it and researching, I stumbled that there's a city in the country that already does it.
mhm.
So, it was very interesting. Just day before yesterday, the NCP party, Supriya Sule, had me do a workshop with all her young leaders. She had all her young leaders from all parts of Maharashtra, from Navi Mumbai, Thana, Solapur, Kolhapur, Bid, Osmanabad, come down, and I did a workshop with them on urban planning. And what do people really want, and how do you achieve it? And so when I spoke about this, they were all really excited. So I'm hoping, through these workshops with young politicians, I'm planting enough seeds so that when the time comes, they will speak up and say, yes, we heard about this, and yes, it works, and this is why it works. So I think we just need to talk about it much more, and then it becomes an idea whose time has come, because it's there in our mind space.
Absolutely.
So so really, that's what I'm trying to do. Every forum that I get, just talk about it. We're trying to in Nepean Road, Malabar Hill, we're actually creating a forum, and we're going to tell the government we want to do this, and at least for our area, let's try it out as a pilot. So we've got Aditya Thackeray's ear right now, the young minister wanting to do good. So hoping to get some pilot started over here.
Let's see what our audiences have said. Do you know which city uses participatory method? Hyderabad, 43%. Pune, well, Ahmedabad 29, Pune 24, and Lucknow 5%. Rahul, what's your response to this?
Well, it's very funny. I'm sure they could have Googled it by now. Pune is the only one. Okay. So for the last decade or so, Pune has been doing it. That's the only city. So every year they put out an ad in the paper, and every neighborhood gets to kind of send their suggestions. So it's still not done in I would say the correct way, because it becomes a citywide thing, and everybody sends their suggestions, and then a bureaucrat sits and selects from it. So it's not a prioritized list.
Sure.
It's not that this neighborhood is saying, if there are 3 things you would do for us, do these 3 and nothing else. So they are getting feedback, but they're not getting a prioritized list. So I feel it needs to be the process needs to be designed a little better than it is. And I'm told the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of dying out because people are not seeing the results. So the feedback loop needs to be closed, and people need to see the results of the participation. So that's not, so we're going to have to if it's taken up, it's going to have to be done a little bit differently.
It's definitely a very ambitious and a very potent process, if it can be adopted, I think it'll change the way our cities are designed. And it'll be truly bottom up, actually,
Yeah.
if this
And
happens.
and it started in a little town in Colombia is
Huh.
where it started. And now actually more than 2,000 cities use it. New York, 30% of New York's budget is decided by the citizen. New York uses it, London uses it, many cities in Germany use it. So there's 2,000 of them now all over the world. So it's not something new, you know.
Mhm. Just
It's catching on.
mm,
Um, in India, democracy is just so low that government really doesn't ask us anything. Um, so yeah,
that's true. Well, fingers crossed for the future as we're looking at it. Let's move on to the next one,
yeah.
please.
So what many of you must have heard about the coastal road in Mumbai, um, where they are reclaiming 120 acres of land. Sorry, 120 hectares of land, and 175 acres is going to become available for public use beside the road. So, for the first time, a new public space is going to be created. So we're trying to convince the government now, and I've made this for them, that we can have various precincts. Mahalakshmi, Marine Drive, Beach Candy, Haji Ali, Worldly Sea Face. They can all have a different character. So we can do this in a very participatory way by having people of that neighborhood come up with, what features they want in the open space um, um, in their area. So there's so many examples of what can happen,
Mm,
in these open spaces. So if citizens come together and prioritize what they want in the open space, rather than some bureaucrat, however well intentioned, sitting somewhere and says, "Acha, we will do one musical fountain and one this and one that and one that." It doesn't make sense. So this is just so much more powerful, because people will own that and they know what they want, right, in their region. So what we're looking at, um, people of the area coming together. So identification of the stakeholders, people who live there, live adjacently, and experts, because people would need to be guided. So maybe 100, 200 people. You don't need to spend more than a couple of days really in the workshop to do this. So you have the meetings, and then what we thought is that this becomes the design brief for an international competition. So get the best landscape designers from all over the world and
mm,
give them a brief that is created by the citizens uh, and experts, and not by the. So they can be, there's a 10-member board or 10-member panel. Two or three can be from the government, but then there should be citizens, etc., on the panel. So I think the richness of the solution would be tremendous in doing that. So that's one initiative that we are working on, and trying to get the government to adopt this process. And I've got politicians working on it, and I've got industrialists working on it, kind of putting this thought into the chief minister's ear whenever they can. The other big problem that most cities in India have is people living in slums. Now, in Bombay, 50-55% of our people live in slums. And uh, maybe this is where you want your poll question to come in again. Uh,
let's get
but
that in. Let's get that in. Swapna,
okay,
can we have poll question 3, please? It's interesting because Bombay has the densest urban slum in all of Asia. I don't know if it still retains the title or the largest slum. So here's a question for our audiences. What is the ideal density of a city? So imagine the cities that you are originally from, and where you're studying. 500 people per kilometer square, 1,000 people, 2,000 people, or 3,000 people. What do you think is an ideal density of a city? Okay, it doesn't seem much, but a kilometer square, if you can imagine, is I don't know. It's a you can how long will it take you to walk a kilometer square, Rahul? Just to give people an estimate.
Kilometers, 2 minutes? No, no. Okay, sorry. To walk 500 meters is about 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So walking across is about 10
Yeah.
minutes.
So in
Kilometers.
your walk distance of 10 kilometers, for people who have a hard time, like me, imagining math, that's what you're looking at. How many people should survive or live or prosper and sustain in that zone? Let's see if we've got some answers. I hope they've responded. Swapna, can we have the answers, please? 1,000 seems to be the most popular, although the others are not far behind. That's 33%. 2,000 is 28%, and 500 again 28%, and 3,000 people 11%. So that's too crowded, perhaps. What is your ideal density, Rahul?
Actually, I gave those points. I gave those the multiple choice, and there's a mistake there because the ideal is 10,000. Okay, so it's
10,000.
misleading. Sorry, everybody. But 10,000 is an ideal for a city because it's dense enough. So with FSI 1, you can have 30% of the land used, and you can build ground plus 6 floors and still have enough open space, etc., and still feel the energy of a city. It doesn't feel like a suburb. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. Paris is 6,000. London has about 8. Mumbai has 22,000 average. Delhi is much lower. Well, it depends which part of Delhi, but I'm not so familiar with it. But generally, so Singapore is about 10. So it's an ideal place, right? So around 10,000 really works, and the 10,000 magic number is interesting because even in a place like Maharashtra, if you were to say 70% of the people urbanized, right now only about 40% of the people live in the cities. If you say 70-80% move to cities, so 110 million people in Maharashtra, if you say 80 million move to cities, if you take the land mass of Maharashtra, you would need only 3% of the land mass to be urbanized, to accommodate everybody at 10,000. Yeah. But if you see, already about 4.5% is urbanized. So then you realize it's actually just a question of planning. It's some areas are too dense, some areas are too sparse.
Yeah.
So it's a question of getting a balance. We don't need to urbanize more. We need to protect our farmlands because that's where we grow our food. Mm-hmm. We need to protect our farmlands. We need to increase our forest lands, etc., and not urbanize anymore because there really isn't any need for it. But what happens is that when you move out of major cities, urban planners drop the FSI. You say, okay, in this area only 0.1 or 0.25 or 0.5. That's a mistake. Wherever we urbanize, we must allow an average density of at least 1 or 1.5. Then there will not be urban sprawl, and then your road lengths will be less, your water supply lines will be smaller, your sewerage lines will be less. So the cost of development will also be lower, and it'll just be nicer places to actually live. So
and it'll be more equitable is what I imagine it to be. It'll be far more equitable.
Yeah, if you can manage that with the city and country fingers, so that 10,000 people and then immediately you've got the countryside, I think it'll be fantastic. But if you look at slums, there's over 1 lakh people living per square kilometer. So it's 10 times what it ought to be.
Mm.
And they're all packed on the ground and maybe ground and one, if at all. So very, very dense, absolutely no open space, nothing. And there is only one system that is prevalent in the country, which is let developers come in and redevelop slums. And but mathematically, so it sounds good on paper that a developer will come in, they'll build free housing for the people who live in slums, and then they will generate the money by using part of the land, selling it at a higher price, and that will subsidize these free homes. So on paper, it sounds great. For builders, it's fantastic because they're getting free land. The most expensive part of a development is land. They're still selling at prices in Bombay of 1 lakh rupees a square foot when they're getting the land at zero and they're actually spending only 5,000 rupees a square foot. So you can see the profit margin there. That's why the builder political nexus in this is just so strong because there's such huge profits to be made. But mathematically, this is the worst thing we can do because a slum is already the densest settlement. And typically what a developer does is that he squeezes all of them onto 1/3 of the land, and then that 2/3 is used for sale. So you're getting the density then now to 3 lakh people per square kilometer. So there's no way it can work in the long run. I mean, no matter what the developer does, it's the quality of air, the quality of life will be so bad. And we've seen that in Bombay over and over again. So what we are trying to convince the government is that, see, this schemes in Bombay started in 1993, and they were supposed to build 10 million homes in 10 years. They've hardly built, I think, 50 lakh. So their target, so it's going to take them at this rate more than 150 years to develop all the slums. What they were supposed to do in 10 years is going to take 150 years. And what they're ending up with things which are worse than what they started with. So what we are saying is that the only way out is for people living in slums to self-develop. And they can afford it. So, it's a participatory approach. The financial contribution, it doesn't cost much to build a 6-story building. For each person living in the slum, it's 12 lakhs. They can easily get a loan. The EMI on 10 years will be 6,000, which is really not a problem for most people. Yeah. They will have direct control. It will be transparent. The government can come in with incentives. Okay, we'll get you. Now, the government doesn't want to build. It doesn't have the money to build, whatever. But at least they can arrange for them to get a cheaper loan. You can borrow money from the World Bank at 2%, lend it here for 4% instead of the 8% that the HDFC Bank does. So you can give a loan at half the price, and that's all they have to do. Just arrange that loan. We know from other self-help groups that poorer people are much more earnest about paying. It's the richer people that don't pay bank loans, but the poorer people actually pay back. So you don't have to worry about pay back. There's enough data saying that. So this is the only way we see that slums can really be redeveloped. And there's a new role then for architecture firms like us or NGOs to come in and through a participatory model, help people decide what they need and design it for them, link them, to the finance, etc., and rebuild slowly. We feel that really this is the only way. And again, we're talking to a number of people, number of slum pockets now to try and do a pilot with this. I've spoken with the government here, but they listen from one ear, they let it out from the other, because the nexus with the builder is just too strong. The amount of money they get from the builders is just too much. So we have to do it without them. But this is again part of my seeding with those young politicians that I meet, saying, this is what you really need to do. Coming to the last part, Shrishti, do you have any questions or anything, or should I move on?
I do have questions, but let's close this and then I'll ask my questions.
Okay. So there's a part of Mumbai that when I was growing up, Hanging Gardens, below Hanging Gardens, there was a forest. What I find now is a 12-acre forest. It's really from prehistoric times. It survived. It survived the development of Bombay. And when I was 17, 18, I had a Doberman and I used to walk with her all over. And I remember walking into this forested zone and exploring it. My younger days in Nainital in the Kumaon Hills, is seek out the tiny bit of forest and kind of wander in it. So this 12 acres is there, and it survived all these years. So during the lockdown, me and my wife were walking close by, and then we went in once more. Now it's all locked up and barred, and nobody can go in. But we kind of climbed the fence, etc., and we went in. And I felt that this needs to be experienced by more people. So I'm a founder member of the Nepean Sea Road Citizens Forum, where we do initiatives here. And I figured if we did it as a citizens initiative, it'd be more palatable with the government. And so we went to the government, we went to Aditya Thackeray again and said, this is something the citizens would like to do. We will raise the money, we will do everything. We just need your blessings and nothing else. And it just caught everybody's imagination. Whoever we showed it to, so this is where it is. So you have, I can't draw anymore.
750 meters.
So
5 meters. Yeah.
This is Hanging Gardens up here. And this is Valkeshwar Road down here. And this is building. And so this is a 12-acre forest in between. Yeah. So this is where this is coming up. So just below Hanging Gardens. And whoever I showed it to just loved the idea. But when we first conceptualized it, it was just repairing very old pathways that probably built by the British were there, and they were non-existent almost. You could barely discern where they were. But whilst we were exploring it more, we realized that there is so many animals in here, and there's so many snakes in here and cobras in here, that it could be dangerous. And if we allow more people to come in, we will really drive all the animals away.
That's true.
So then we hit upon the idea that, why don't we raise it so that the forest floor remains the way it is. So it's a raised walkway. It's just done many places in the world, nothing really new. So we presented 3 options. This was the most expensive one, but Aditya Thackeray and the BMC said, no, this is lovely. We want this done. We will pay for it. We don't need any corporate money. How much does it cost? We said 10 crores. They didn't bat an eyelid. Yeah, we have the money. Suddenly, when they want something, there's plenty of money. I was like shocked. I said 10 crores. I said, yeah, 10, only 10. I said, yeah, only 10. Banao. So it was amazing how it kind of caught everybody's imagination. And the fact that, that old thing we started of that everybody wants to live in the forest. Everybody wants to be a part of the forest. It is just so innate in all of us that it was, just something that they loved. So then we had to conceptualize, how do we do it? How would we light it? There shouldn't be any pollution of light in the forest in the night. The nocturnal animals shouldn't be disturbed. With just very small LEDs, which will only light the pathway. So we've just now completed the tender process for this. I've never worked for the BMC. We had to go through a process of them registering us and all of that. And it's been a hell of a learning curve and I'm also terrified because we're going through the tendering process of the BMC, and we'll get a contractor from the BMC, etc. I'm terrified of what the quality would actually be. We try to write in a lot of the specs to safeguard that, but yeah, let's see what happens. So this is my first kind of project with the BMC, which hopefully will see the light of day.
It's fantastic and ambitious, and like you said, it does take you back into the forest. It's amazing.
Yep, full circle.
Full circle. Perfect slide to end the presentation with. This is fantastic. Can we now see you, because I think your presentation kind of let you share with you. Let's have you back. There we are. Oh, perfect. Yes, the light is good. This is fantastic. I think and I think it's such a, it just makes you want to be there. And that happens very rarely in many projects. It draws you in, and that's fantastic. And what I really liked about that project is that it's actually a citizen initiative. It came from the people. It came from what people wanted, and I have a feeling that if it had come from somebody in the government, it probably would have been cemented.
Well, I think so. So there's a couple of other projects they're doing in the area, and so they would have done it in stainless steel, for example. They wouldn't have done it in wood, because that's just easy. That's what they know. So they wouldn't have taken the trouble to detail it in wood. Which so it's also a risk, because you really have to study which wood will work, will it last, how will they maintain it. So there are risks involved, but I'm willing to take them and kind of think through them, which I think with the government, they don't pause enough to think. Someone comes up with the idea, then they want to do it as fast as they can. We went to them after 6 months of thinking. And then when they said they want to do it, they said, Rahul, tender next week. So if we hadn't kind of mulled over this for 6 months on our own, it would have been a disaster. No?
I think it'll be quite a tourist attraction, I think, once it does come up. And I hope there is a way to restrict crowds, because again,
ticketing.
Yeah, ask people to pay money, and many people will go back. That's true. It's a fabulous project, and I suppose in some sense it also is in culminating a lot of the things that you talked about. When I look at your suggestion of the kind of robustness, you talked about biophiliac, you talked about timelessness, you talked about socially responsive, and this project kind of is an embodiment of all those core philosophies or mission statements that you started out with. So it's quite an interesting, exciting project. And the question that I had for you was that a lot of times we as citizens wait for the government to respond. Say, okay, the government doesn't do this, and they haven't filled the pothole right, and look at how many potholes they've left away, and we don't get water supply. And so we're constantly in this battle of blaming the government because, our taxpayers' money is going and not enough is happening. In some sense, your participatory design model is bringing the two stakeholders, the most important stakeholders, on the same platform. And as you mentioned, it's not an easy task to do. So for the audiences right now that we have here, a lot of students, what would you advise them, or how would you recommend they start building that conversation or triggering that conversation? Because we can't wait for a Rahul Kadri in Bombay, but to see a larger impact throughout the country. What would you recommend young people can do?
Well, the only see the government responds to associations, to groups of people. They don't want to deal with each one. Yeah. So so that's why if I had gone on my own to the BMC, if I had gone on my own, um, they would have heard me out, this and the other, but it may not have worked. But because I chose to go through the citizens forum, so it was a number of us going and a number of us who wanted this. And politicians ultimately want your votes. So we have to understand that, right? So what do they want? They want votes. So if you're going to go with numbers, they're going to pay attention to you. So it's as simple as that. So that's how the democracy works, and you have to use that. So forming an association, and the larger the group, the more powerful it is. So that's why, in Mumbai, communities of slums are powerful. And really, we have learned, looking at the power of slums. They say, hey, they get the government to do everything for them. Whereas we try to go individually and get things done, and nothing happens. But when we formed the Nepean Sea Road Citizens Forum, and we started doing everything as a forum, we are representing now 5,000 people in the neighborhood. So we don't have potholes over here, and the assistant commissioner is on speed dial on all our phones, and he picks up our calls. It's because we represent 5,000 people. So it's about representational democracy.
Very interesting.
Also knowing who your cooperator is. I mean, none of us know who. We don't know the political system that we are in. We're in the system and we don't know how it works. So I think that the civics lessons, etc., that we had in the 9th standard or 10th standard really need to be brought out, and we need to be re-educated on how democracy works and what are the processes. We still don't know how budgets work in the city. It's such a opaque process to all of us. How do they decide where to spend money every year? 30,000 crores the BMC spends every year. Who decides that?
It's a very important question. Who decides where your money goes? And I also agree that we don't take time to educate ourselves. Like you said, we don't know our cooperator. We don't ask these questions. We always feel that it's such a behemoth to deal with the government. The fact that we know it's an opaque process, the fact that it will be extremely bureaucratic, tends to dissuade us. But I think what you said about the power of the citizenry, the numbers that can make a difference, is a very important lesson. I think.
So it's like, stop saying them and only say us. What are we going to do about it? And not me, not I, but we. So there's no them. Just cancel them. There's only we. What are we going to do about this?
Fantastic. I hope everybody's listening. That's a very, very important distinction. And if, as designers, I think that's what we say. We say that it's a collaborative process. So, we have to go with the same sentiment if you want to change anything. We have a lot of questions coming in. Let me take the first question to you, Rahul. That it's an anonymous attendee. I wish you guys had put your names. They're asking, even though we plan, discuss, and deliberate a lot on what we need to do with our slums, why are we still not able to come up with concrete solutions?
Because people who live in slums so far are very fascinated by getting a free house. They don't know that they're making a Faustian kind of deal where they're getting a free toilet and running water, but what they're giving away forever is their light and ventilation. So they don't realize that this is the bargain. And I think they just feel powerless to feel that they can do it themselves. Like us, they don't feel their power. And the government so far has not given the land rights to people who live in the slum. They give the land rights to the developer. So that's something we're trying to change. We're trying to tell the government that people live in the slums. They've occupied this land. You only give the development rights to a developer. Give it to the people living there. Give them the right, which they've not done, which they're willing to do. Which they're saying, yes, there is no law saying we can't do it, but nobody has come to us. So it's really a question about organizing and doing. But, whoever asked that question is wrong, because this is happening in many places where self-development is happening. It's not something brand new. It's happening in Ahmedabad, it's happening in Pune, it's happening in Varanasi. So there are many places, if you Google, you'll find it is happening. It's just happening in very small numbers. So just for an idea whose time, it takes, it takes that tipping point of enough people talking about it, enough people following it for it to tip. So I'd say it's a beginning, but it will happen.
That's true. And I think that's very optimistic. At least you've made me a little bit more optimistic about where we are headed, for sure. There's another.
I'm accused of that a lot.
I think designers have to be optimistic. Creatives
Yeah,
have
we
to be
have to be.
optimistic.
True.
It's
True.
very,
Otherwise
very
you're stuck.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
Another anonymous attendee, while planning a town which has a rich cultural background that is gradually fading away, do you think functional futuristic development and conservation can go hand in hand? So it's a big question. I think it's got three components. There is a rich cultural background that's fading away in planning a town. There is functional futuristic development, and I'm assuming that is about the speed at which is development, 3D printing, etc., and conservation. Can they go hand in hand?
Ideally, yes. So I think what we need to adopt, which is fairly well known all over the world, is any development which is coming up in a residential zone at the least needs to be approved by the neighbors so that it fits in, right? Maybe not in commercial zones, but in the residential zones, neighbors should have a say so that the character of the place that they have grown up in and they have bought into kind of remains, or they have a say on the direction it will take, and they agree on the direction it should take. So if neighbors have a say, it will preserve the character to some extent. So I am not one for grand gestures, for major changes. I think that's only needed in transportation planning, but I'm an incrementalist. I feel cities need to evolve slowly. And we need to be, so therefore, this participatory democracy is important, that, citizens have a say in how their city evolves. And it's not done by some bureaucratic stroke of the pen, wherein, suddenly the FSI in an area is completely changed, and now you're going to get towers there. So, Old Dadar, for example, now they've said next to the train station, you can have FSI 6. It's going to completely transform the area, right? So, so I think participatory planning in that way will solve this, and doing things incrementally will solve this. The only thing I feel that needs an oversight is transportation and nothing else. And for that, we need a transportation authority, which we don't have. No city in India has a transportation authority that looks at all modes of transportation together, right? At least in Mumbai, we have the railways, which is taken care of by the central government. A local railway is taken care of by the central government. We've got the BST, which is a corporation on its own. We've got the PWD looking after roads. We've now got a metro system, which is looked after by the state government. And we've got poor footpaths, which are not looked at by anybody. So there's nobody looking at, the whole picture. So therefore, every department in a bureaucracy just wants to maximize their budget. So the road department, what they want to do is build more roads and bridges. So they look at that, and they won't look at what the railways are doing or what the metro is doing or what the pedestrians need. They will only look at roads. The other problem is that engineers head all of this. Engineers are great, but the engineers need to be told what to do.
They
They
don't
will.
have decision
So,
say.
so we don't tell them what very clearly. So it's a very, the problem is given to them in a very narrow way and not in a holistic way. So if that the definition of the problem that they are trying to solve is given in a holistic way, they will come up with answers that make more sense. But it's defined in a very narrow way. So, for example, Mumbai is now building the most expensive road in the history of mankind. The coastal road is the most expensive road in the history of mankind. Okay, it's 10 kilometers, 9.8, and we're spending 12,500 crores on it. So do the math. There's never a road in history that's cost so much per square kilometer. And the question is why?
Yeah.
Because the engineer was told, build a road which is very fast, without thinking about anything else. So they've built an expressway in the city. Now, why do you need an expressway inside a city which has, on ramps and off? The on ramps and the off ramps are costing 6,000 crores. Why do you need an on ramp and an off ramp in a city? You don't. It's just a city road.
Yeah.
So they're given a very limited, a one-line thing. Build a fast road. So they came up with their answer. So you can't blame them either.
What this also goes, so this whole idea of ad hocism, a little bit, and when you talked about incrementalism, so the way I've seen cities evolve is that there was a master plan, and then population kind of evolves on its own. It's a bit amoebic and amorphous, and it grows organically. And so everything is ad hoc. Things are put into place because suddenly you have lots of people living there, and suddenly there are no piping. So let's dig it up. Let's put a pipe in. It always is extremely organic. So from being incremental to the nature of evolution being organic, to the way planners work or the government corporations work, how do you streamline all of that? Because there is no other way for most cities to evolve there's not enough anticipation, essentially, is what I'm coming at.
Yeah, so this is also to do with how our cities are governed. So at least in Bombay, the different departments of the municipal corporation don't talk to each other. The water supply department doesn't talk to the electricity, and the electricity doesn't talk to the BMC. So there is no one looking at an area holistically. They're only looking at their function. So the stormwater doesn't talk to the sewage department. The sewage doesn't talk to the water doesn't talk to the electrical. So if we do this neighborhood wise, and we say what needs to be done in the neighborhood, what improvements do we need in the neighborhood this year, right? Then that's looks at them. Then we say, okay, we're going to dig up the roads this year. Is there anything else we need to do in the electrical? So it needs to be someone looking at all of this, and if it's done at the level of the neighborhood, that's the best. So Nepean Sea Road Citizens Forum has taken it upon itself to do this. So our road was being redone, and we immediately wrote to all the departments. We said, hey, stormwater guys, hey, water supply, hey, electricity, hey, gas, lay your lines now and lay them a little extra capacity, because this is your chance to do it very quickly. You won't be disturbed. So we became the coordinating agency for all of them. So it just happened that we happened to be there and we did it. But see, there needs to be someone. So it's again system. The way the system is designed, it will not work. So you need to rejig the system and the process a little bit, and it'll work. Because the people are very passionate about what they do, and they're very good at what they do.
Just a thought came to mind that now that we have at the center government, we have a Ministry of Corporation. I hope there's more trickle down effect at state levels and district levels and village.
No. That is the minister of cooperation, right? That's cooperative farms.
Uh,
That's cooperative sugar mills,
oh, right.
cooperative banks.
My bad.
Hello, that's where the money is. Shishti, that's where the money is. BJP wants to take over all the cooperatives that are with the regional parties. Regional parties get their power from the cooperatives,
Oh,
the milk cooperative, the sugar cooperative, the bank cooperative. All those cooperatives are run regionally. So this is a very grand design to start breaking all that up. It's
um,
not to improve the functionality.
well, like I say, optimism, huh? Sometimes misplaced. There's another question by Alal Al Walid Al Baik. They're asking, in an extremely hot, dry area such as Riyadh, it is incredibly difficult for people to walk during many different times throughout the day. Do you recommend an excessive use of shading devices in all walkways, or will that be a very material intensive exercise? Yeah, that's the question.
Well, what would be ideal is to get an oasis, right? So you want to create the conditions that create an oasis. So the trees, most trees, transpire so much that the microclimate around them is completely changed. So actually, just having shaded tree-lined pathways is the ideal thing. And I think Riyadh, has enough water to be able to do that, or even recycle their sewage to be able to do it. So I think just planting more indigenous trees and making sure your pathways are shaded would go a long way, and is the ideal way, really.
Thank you for that. I think I have maybe one last question, and then we're almost out of time. We're actually sort of quite beyond our time. So, well, this harks back to your time as a student. What was the biggest obstacle as an architecture student?
What is the biggest obstacle as an architecture student? Well, one thing I can say, we didn't have talks like this. We weren't exposed to a lot of people. So you guys are really lucky in that sense. I mean, 15 speakers over 15 days. I mean, all great. What was the biggest obstacle? I think the biggest obstacle that we had is the quality of professors, because many of them were there for the wrong reasons, and they maybe uh, had not spent enough time in the library and not read enough about theory, and so therefore just wouldn't understand what we were trying to do. I didn't face that so much because I was able to bullshit my way through college a lot. um, but I think just quality of professors. In our early days in Academy of Architecture, first 2 years we had a brilliant set, and then kind of the third and the fourth year, just there were just two or three of them who were really, really very good, and the best were really ones who just let us be. Who just listened to us and let us talk, and kind of trip over ourselves and kind of figure out the nonsense we were doing without saying anything. So those were the wise ones. So yeah, I think in college it was really some professors who thought they knew too much and were imposing their ideas on us, and we didn't agree. So that was the obstacle, I would say. But overall, I think Academy of Architecture was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. There was tremendous freedom, and some of our professors were just fantastic. Our library was great. We didn't have internet or anything, so it was the library we spent time in, poring over books. And our librarian was great. If there was any book we asked for, she bought it for us. So yeah, Academy of Architecture in those days was fantastic. I think I learned more there than I learned when I went abroad. in the US because there was just so much self-learning. Just the library, just if you wanted to learn, you were left alone to learn. The resources were available and you could just do it. Yeah.
I think that's a great note to close today's session on, because I find that a lot of students, and we talked about this in the previous session, that a lot of people do depend on Google to do their reading, which does not, as we all know, replace books and deep reading. I think what the advantages of being a student in today's day and age, like you said, the exposure is immense. And I hope everybody who's listening in is grateful for that. And of course, we have great professors. I know that you go and lecture in different colleges as well. So I hope that you'll get a chance to come to Cinder Bay and work with the students there. But thank you so much, Rahul, for sharing such great processes. I think Scrum is brilliant, and it's very close to design thinking for me. So I mean, I really enjoy that process, and I do hope that the students and the audiences appreciate this idea of participatory work with your clientele, with the public space, with the government. It's us, not them. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we are very, very grateful for having you here. It's been a privilege. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you. Thank you, Shrishti, Mr. Nair, Sapna, Sophia, all of you. Thank you so much.
Superb. And before we drop off, I just want to remind everybody there are 2 more talks to go this week. Tomorrow we have Mariana, and the day after we have Fatima. Again, 2 ladies of architecture. So it's great to have more women talking about architecture. So please do tune in. Rahul, I hope you get a chance to tune in as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be traveling, but you know, these 2 ladies sound just fantastic and amazing, and I wish I could attend. Maybe for some time I'll try and log in.
I'll send you the link later on, perhaps. But it's been great having you, and please let us know when the walkway begins. I would love to come and visit, and I'm sure everybody in the audience would. That was a brilliant project, and a lot of luck to you on seeing that happen and becoming a reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you.